Let's bring in Neama Rahmani, a former federal prosecutor and president of West Coast Trial Lawyers. So the defense, Kohberger's defense team, is asking that the death penalty be taken off the table based on what you know of their filings. What do you think the chances are?
John, I think the chances are slim, but this is what death penalty lawyers try to do. They try to save their client's life. And we recently saw in another very high-profile Idaho murder case where Lori Vallow, the doomsday cult mom, the death penalty was removed in that case because the prosecution didn't turn over evidence. So what the defense in the Kohberger case is trying to do is file every motion. They're taking a kitchen sink approach because they're not just looking at the trial court and the jurors. They're looking at the mandatory state and federal appeals that follow every death penalty case because their singular goal is to keep Bryan Kohberger off death row.
You think they're grasping at straws here, or they have a case?
I do believe they're grasping at straws. You know, there is the single source DNA that puts Kohberger at the scene. His cell phone appears to travel from Washington State, where he lived, to Idaho, where the murders happened. And of course, the white Hyundai Elantra that really broke this case. So there's a lot of evidence here that points to Bryan Kohberger. And what the defense is trying to do is, again, take that kitchen sink approach, throw everything out there. Maybe an appellate judge down the road will say, you know what, the trial judge made a mistake, and for that reason, we're going to spare Kohberger's life.
You know, when this case first broke, it was more than a month, I think, that before any arrests were made. And people, especially in Idaho, in that community, were saying, what's going on? How come police haven't made an arrest? This is, you know, this is bungled police work. But it turns out they were, you know, they had their eye on Kohberger all this time, and were sort of, you know, trying to do everything they could to make sure that they had an ironclad case against him. It would seem pretty tough for the defense to pick that case apart now.
It is very tough. And like you said, John, it did take approximately a month, and one of the most gruesome murders in Idaho state history. And as a former prosecutor, you would expect there to be a lot more evidence linking the crime scene to Kohberger, but he is one of the most careful criminal defendants I've ever covered in my more than 2 decades of doing this. He is a criminology PhD student. He would wear gloves everywhere he went. He would discard his trash in plastic bags and other folks' trash. And it was only through his father's DNA that they were able to do an IgG analysis and link that DNA on the knife sheath back to Kohberger.
I remember the 2 traffic stops that state police made as he was on his way back to Pennsylvania from where he was living in Idaho. Do you see any, you know, the fact that the state police knew he was a suspect and pulled him over? Do you see any problems there?
No, police can pull folks over, they can ask questions, and you're right. Bryan Kohberger was pulled over with his father as they were traveling from Washington to Pennsylvania. So they had their eyes on him because his cell phone had pinged at or near the home where the murders happened. Not on the night of the murder, because again, he was so savvy and sophisticated, he either turned his phone off or he put it in airplane mode before he got there. So they were eyeing Bryan Kohberger for weeks, and fortunately, they were able to get some discarded food that his father had thrown out. And when that happens, there's no Fourth Amendment protection, and that's how they were able to close the loop on this case.
All right, Neama Rahmani, we appreciate it. Thanks for your expertise.
Thanks, John.
And we'll be right back with more Fox